Welcome to the Science of Hockey, the podcast where we break down the science behind ice hockey. I'm the analyst, your host, and every week we explore the data, research, and evidence that shape how we play, train, and understand the game of hockey. From biomechanics to performance psychology, we take you beyond the rink and into the research lab, giving you insights that go beyond hearsay and into what really makes the difference on the ice. Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or just someone passionate about the sport, we're here to bring you scientifically backed information in a language that's friendly and easy to understand. So grab your skates and let's dive into the science of hockey. Welcome to the Science of Hockey, where we break down the science behind the game. I'm your host, the analyst. Today, we explore the physical therapy techniques that help ice hockey players recover from injuries and return stronger. From concussions to knee strains, find out what keeps athletes performing at their peak.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be talking about ice hockey injuries.
Ooh, exciting.
I know this is something you're particularly interested in as you kind of look towards a career in physical therapy.
Definitely. Yeah.
So this is going to be a really good one for you, and especially since hockey's popularity has just exploded over the past few decades.
Absolutely.
And so this knowledge is more valuable than ever, I think.
For sure.
We're going to be using as our guide a really interesting study from the International Journal of Sports Physical Therapy.
Okay.
And this study, it gives us a really good comprehensive overview of common injuries, how those injuries happen,
Right.
and what rehab strategies are most effective.
Awesome.
But before we get into all of that, I have to share a statistic with you that might make you kind of wince.
Okay.
Ice hockey had the highest rate of athlete-to-athlete trauma out of all the sports
Wow.
at the 2010 Olympics.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's a startling statistic. And it really underscores how important it is to understand the unique biomechanics
All right.
of hockey to really effectively treat and prevent these injuries.
Exactly. So our mission today is to explore what makes hockey so demanding on the body.
Yeah.
See how those demands can lead to specific injuries, and then equip you with the knowledge to help athletes stay safe and on the ice.
I like it. Empowering athletes with knowledge and strategies.
Yeah.
Not just treating them after something goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Okay, so let's dig in. First off, did you know that between 1990 and 2010, participation in hockey in the U.S. grew by 143%?
Wow.
That is a massive
That's huge.
influx of players hitting the ice,
Yeah.
which unfortunately means a lot more injuries.
A lot more potential for injuries and a lot more need for folks like yourself who are interested in this as a career.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So when we think about hockey injuries, we often think about those big dramatic collisions, right?
The big hits.
But what makes hockey so uniquely risky goes beyond just those big hits.
Absolutely. Yeah, the nature of skating itself creates a whole other layer of risk.
Right.
You know, imagine trying to maintain balance and generate power
Right.
while gliding on a narrow blade on a surface with almost no friction.
Why?
It's a recipe for some biomechanical challenges that you just don't see in other sports.
That's like trying to dance on butter knives.
I love that. It's a great analogy. And then to add another layer of complexity, different positions in hockey come with completely different demands.
Right.
So, for example, you take the forwards, they're all about explosive bursts of speed, quick changes of direction.
Right.
And that requires incredible strength in their hips and knees for those push-off strides.
Yeah, I can just picture those intense sprints to chase down the puck.
Exactly.
It's no wonder knee injuries are so prevalent among forwards.
For sure. And speaking of knees, the study highlighted something I found really interesting.
Okay.
A similarity between the biomechanics of ice hockey and speed skating,
Oh, really?
especially when it comes to those initial powerful strides.
I never would have made that connection. What are the implications of that for somebody like me who's interested in physical therapy?
Well, understanding that shared biomechanics can really inform your approach to rehabilitation.
Okay.
So, for example, incorporating horizontally directed plyometric exercises.
Okay.
Those are exercises that focus on explosive horizontal movements.
I see.
Into late-stage rehab programs could be really beneficial
Got it.
for both speed skaters and hockey players recovering from lower body injuries.
So recognizing those seemingly unexpected connections can actually lead to better rehab strategies.
For sure.
That's a great takeaway.
Absolutely. It really highlights how crucial it is to look beyond the injury itself
Yeah,
and really understand the mechanics of movement in the sport.
for sure.
Yes.
So we've talked about the unique demands of hockey, how different positions require specific movements. Now, let's get into the injuries themselves.
Okay, let's do it.
One interesting little tidbit from the study. Statistically, the second period of a hockey game has the highest injury rate. Why would that be?
That's a great question, and it could point to fatigue as a major factor.
Okay.
As players get tired, their technique might start to falter.
Right.
Reaction times slow down, and their bodies become more susceptible to injury.
So conditioning isn't just about performance on the ice. It's also a really crucial part of injury prevention.
Absolutely.
That's something I'll definitely keep in mind
100%.
as I work with athletes in the future.
Yeah.
And when it comes to specific injury locations, the study breaks it down like this.
Okay.
Knee injuries are the most common at 13.5%, followed by AC joint injuries at 8.9%.
Okay.
Then upper leg contusions at 6.2%, and finally hip and groin strains at 4.5%.
Got it.
Knowing these patterns can be really helpful in anticipating the types of cases I might encounter as a PT.
Absolutely.
So speaking of anticipating, you mentioned an interest in injury prevention.
Yes.
And one of the biggest areas of concern in hockey, especially with its growing popularity among young athletes, is concussions.
Concussions for sure. That's a hot topic these days.
Yeah, they are a hot topic. I would love to learn more about what the research says about the prevalence of concussions in hockey.
Yeah.
And, of course, what we can do to prevent them.
Of course.
The study mentioned that the incidence of concussions is 3 times higher.
Wow.
In youth players, 9% compared to adults, 3%.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference. Why do you think that is?
There's probably a few factors at play. Younger players just might be more susceptible to concussions due to their developing brains and weaker neck muscles.
Okay.
There's also the possibility of underreporting in older athletes
Right.
who may feel pressured to play through their injuries or fear being sidelined.
That makes sense. And this is where the importance of baseline testing comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tests like the SCAT-T2 and IMPACT-T can really help with accurate diagnosis.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about those tests and why they're so important?
Yeah, the SCAT-2 stands for Sport Concussion Assessment Tool 2,
Okay.
and IMPACT-T stands for Immediate Post-Concussion Assessment and Cognitive Testing. These are standardized tools that are used to assess an athlete's cognitive function,
Okay.
like their memory, their attention, their reaction time, both before and after a suspected concussion.
Yep.
By comparing post-injury scores to baseline scores that were taken before the season starts,
Right.
we can more accurately identify if a concussion has occurred.
So these tests are like a cognitive snapshot. That
Exactly.
helps us track any changes after a potential head injury.
Exactly.
Okay, now, when it comes to managing concussions, the study mentioned a bit of debate around complete rest versus active rest
Yes.
in those early stages after the injury. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely an evolving area of research. Traditionally, complete rest was the standard approach, but emerging evidence suggests that carefully guided active rest,
Okay.
which could include things like light aerobic activity and some cognitive exercises,
I see.
might actually promote a smoother recovery.
So it's not necessarily about shutting down all activity,
Right.
but finding that sweet spot
Finding that balance.
of gradual reintroduction.
Exactly.
Okay, and vestibular rehabilitation plays a key role in addressing dizziness and balance issues.
Absolutely.
Right.
Vestibular rehab can be incredibly effective in helping athletes regain their equilibrium
Right.
and reduce those debilitating symptoms that often linger after a concussion.
Awesome. We've covered a lot about concussions, which are obviously a major concern in a contact sport like hockey.
For sure.
But let's move down the body now and talk about another common injury, especially for those forwards we were discussing earlier, MCL injuries.
Ah, yes, the medial collateral ligament, or MCL,
Yeah.
which runs along the inner side of the knee. Remember how we talked about the powerful push-off motions
Yes.
forwards used to generate speed?
Uh-huh.
Well, that repetitive motion, combined with the risk of getting hit from the side,
Right.
puts a lot of stress on the MCL,
Okay.
making it prone to injury.
So the way they skate actually makes them more susceptible to this particular type of knee injury.
It does.
That's fascinating. What can be done from a rehab perspective to help an athlete recover from an MCL injury?
Well, first and foremost, we need to allow those ligaments to heal properly,
Right.
which may involve some initial immobilization.
Okay.
But beyond that, it's crucial to address any muscle weaknesses
Okay.
that might have contributed to the injury in the first place.
So it's not just about fixing the knee, but looking at that entire kinetic chain.
Strengthening the hip abductors is particularly important because weakness in these muscles can contribute to what we call valgus loading,
Okay.
which is that inward collapse of the knee that you sometimes see during movements like squatting or running.
Right.
And valgus loading puts extra stress on the MCL,
I see.
making it more susceptible to injury. By strengthening the hip abductors, we can help prevent that inward knee collapse and protect the MCL.
Wow, that's really insightful. I never realized how connected the strength of the hip muscles is to the stability of the knee.
It's all interconnected, and that's one of the things that makes physical therapy so fascinating.
Yeah.
Understanding how seemingly different parts of the body work together to create smooth, efficient movement. And, of course, how those connections can contribute to injury when there's a weakness or imbalance somewhere along the chain.
I'm definitely starting to appreciate the complexity of it all. And preseason functional screens could be really helpful in identifying those athletes who might be at higher risk for MCL injuries, right?
Absolutely. Early identification is key.
Yeah.
By pinpointing those athletes who might be more prone to MCL injuries, we can implement targeted prevention strategies.
Right.
Like incorporating those hip abductor strengthening exercises we talked about, and potentially reduce the incidence of these injuries.
Great. From the knee, we move down to the ankle.
Okay.
You'd think with all that, padding ankle injuries wouldn't be that common in hockey.
You would think.
But the study actually highlights them as a significant concern.
It's true, and it's not just any ankle injury,
Okay.
but a specific type, high ankle sprains.
Okay.
And believe it or not, the design of the hockey skate itself actually contributes to the risk.
I'm intrigued. How does a skate cause a high ankle sprain?
It all comes down to the positioning of the ankle.
Oh, yeah?
Hockey skates, especially those for non-goalie players, force the ankle into a slightly dorsiflexed position,
Okay.
basically pointing the toes upward, which helps with that forward lean during skating.
Right.
But that same position makes the ankle more susceptible to a high ankle sprain when the foot is forcefully twisted inward, as often happens during a collision or an awkward fall.
So it's like a trade-off between skating efficiency and injury risk.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. What makes high ankle sprains different from regular ankle sprains?
Well, a regular ankle sprain usually involves the ligaments on the outside of the ankle.
Okay.
A high ankle sprain, however, involves the syndesmosis,
Okay.
which is a strong fibrous ligament that connects the two bones of the lower leg, the tibia and the fibula.
Right.
It's located higher up on the ankle, hence the name high ankle sprain.
And are high ankle sprains more serious than regular sprains?
They can be, yes, because the syndesmosis is such a strong ligament, and the forces involved in a high ankle sprain are often greater. These injuries typically take longer to heal
Got it.
and require a more structured approach to rehabilitation.
Okay, so let's talk about that rehab.
Yeah.
What does the study recommend for a hockey player recovering from a high ankle sprain?
It outlines a three-stage approach. The first stage is immobilization to allow those ligaments to heal properly.
Okay.
Then we move into gradual mobilization exercises to restore range of motion in the ankle joint.
Right.
And finally, the focus shifts to advanced on-ice training to prepare the ankle for the demands of the sport.
I bet those specialized on-ice drills are really essential.
They are.
They help to simulate game-like scenarios and ensure the ankle is truly ready for those quick turns, stops, and starts that are so characteristic of hockey.
Exactly. It's not just about getting the ankle moving again. It's about rebuilding strength, stability, and confidence.
Right.
So that player can return to the ice safely and effectively.
Yeah, and throughout that entire rehab process, we need to address any underlying biomechanical issues that might have contributed to the injury in the first place.
100%. So for example, if a player has limited ankle dorsiflexion, we would work on improving that mobility
Right.
to reduce the stress on the syndesmosis.
So it's a really comprehensive approach that goes beyond just fixing the injured ankle
Yeah.
and addresses that entire kinetic chain.
Yes. One of the key principles of effective sports physical therapy.
It's amazing how much we've covered already: the demands of different positions, the impact of those high-velocity collisions,
Yeah.
the biomechanics of skating, and the importance of taking that holistic approach to treatment and rehab.
We've only just scratched the surface. But I think it's a great foundation for understanding the complexities of hockey injuries.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I wanted to touch on one more point that relates to your interest in working with athletes. We've talked a lot about treating injuries, but what about preventing them in the first place?
Prevention is absolutely crucial, and it's an area where physical therapists can play a huge role. We can educate athletes, coaches, and parents about common hockey injuries.
Right.
The risks associated with certain training techniques, the importance of proper warm-up and cool-down routines.
Okay.
We can also conduct preseason screenings
Right.
to identify athletes who might be at higher risk for specific injuries,
Yeah.
and implement targeted training programs to address those weaknesses.
So it's about being proactive, not just reactive.
Exactly. And by shifting our focus from simply fixing injuries to preventing them,
Yeah.
we can help athletes stay healthy, perform at their best, and enjoy the sport they love for years to come.
That's a great note to end on. We'll be back in just a moment to delve even deeper into the world of hockey injuries. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We've covered a lot of ground, from concussions to high ankle sprains, but our exploration of hockey injuries isn't over yet.
It's true.
There's still so much to uncover.
There is.
All right, we've tackled the head, the knee, and the ankle. Where to next on our journey through hockey injuries?
Let's shift our focus to the shoulder. As you can imagine, in a sport known for its physicality, shoulder injuries are pretty common.
Oh, absolutely. Those bone-jarring checks against the boards must put a lot of stress on the shoulder joint.
They certainly do, and the study points out that shoulder complex injuries, which encompass the glenohumeral joint, AC joint, and all the surrounding soft tissues, account for a significant portion of hockey-related ailments.
So we're talking about everything from sprains and strains to dislocations and separations.
Exactly. And understanding the mechanisms behind these injuries is crucial for effective treatment and prevention.
Let's break it down a bit further, starting with the glenohumeral joint, or GH joint for short. The study mentioned that subluxations and dislocations are particularly common in hockey players.
Right.
What makes the GH joint so vulnerable in this sport?
Well, think about the position of the arm during a check.
Okay.
It's often abducted, meaning lifted away from the body and externally rotated with the palm facing forward. When that force comes in, it can drive the head of the humerus, that's the upper arm bone, forward, causing it to partially or completely dislocate from the glenoid fossa, which is the socket part of the shoulder joint.
Ouch, that sounds incredibly painful, and I imagine those dislocations can be pretty debilitating for a hockey player, especially since the sport demands so much upper body strength and mobility.
You're absolutely right. Shoulder dislocations can significantly impact a player's ability to shoot, pass, and check effectively, and the recovery process can be quite lengthy, often involving immobilization, physical therapy, and a gradual return to activity.
Speaking of the recovery process, what are some of the key things physical therapists focus on when rehabbing a shoulder dislocation?
Well, the initial goal is to reduce pain and inflammation, and then we shift our attention to restoring range of motion, strength, and stability in the shoulder.
Okay.
This might involve a combination of exercises, manual therapy techniques, and modalities like ultrasound or electrical stimulation.
And I imagine the sport-specific exercises, simulating stick handling and shooting motions, are really important to ensure the shoulder is ready for the demands of hockey.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just regain general strength and mobility. We need to prepare those shoulders for the specific movements and forces they'll encounter on the ice. So we gradually increase the load and complexity of those sport-specific exercises as the athlete progresses through their rehab.
Okay, so we've talked about GH joint dislocations. What about the AC joint?
Okay.
The study also highlighted AC joint sprains as another common shoulder injury in hockey.
Yes. The AC joint, which connects the collarbone to the shoulder blade, is particularly susceptible to those direct blows to the shoulder we were discussing earlier.
Right.
A hard fall into the shoulder or a forceful check into the boards can easily sprain or even separate this joint.
It seems like a lot of these injuries stem from those high-impact collisions that are so characteristic of hockey. It makes you wonder, how much can protective gear actually do to mitigate these risks?
That's a great question. While protective gear like shoulder pads and helmets certainly helps to absorb some of the impact, it can't completely eliminate the risk of injury. The forces involved in these collisions are just too great.
So while gear is important, it's not a foolproof solution. We still need to focus on injury prevention strategies like proper checking techniques and strengthening programs.
Exactly. And this is where physical therapists can play a vital role in educating athletes and coaches about safe practices and designing training programs that enhance shoulder stability and resilience.
Now let's shift our focus from the shoulder down to the hip.
Okay.
I know the hip might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you think about hockey injuries,
Yeah.
but the study highlighted its importance in skating mechanics.
It's true, the hip is often overlooked, but plays a crucial role in generating power and stability during those powerful skating strides.
Okay.
And two specific hip conditions that are particularly relevant to hockey players are femoroacetabular impingement, or FAI,
Okay.
and adductor muscle strains.
Okay, FAI sounds pretty intense. What exactly is it?
FAI occurs when there's abnormal contact between the ball and socket joint of the hip, leading to pain, stiffness, and limited range of motion.
Okay.
Essentially, the bones of the hip joint don't fit together as smoothly as they should, causing friction and irritation.
And this is common in hockey players.
It is, especially in goaltenders. Think about the deep butterfly position they often adopt. Their hips are deeply flexed and internally rotated,
Right.
which can put a lot of stress on the front of the hip joint over time. This repetitive motion can lead to wear and tear on the cartilage, causing those bony overgrowths that contribute to impingement.
So the very movements that make goaltenders so effective in blocking shots can actually predispose them to hip problems.
It's a classic example of how the demands of a specific position can influence injury patterns,
Right.
and it highlights the importance of tailoring prevention and rehab strategies to the individual athlete and their role on the team.
Now, what about adductor strains? How do those fit into the hockey injury equation?
The adductor muscles, which run along the inner thigh, are responsible for pulling the legs together in hockey. They're heavily engaged during those powerful skating strides, especially during crossovers and changes of direction.
So the repetitive explosive movements of skating put a lot of strain on those adductors, making them prone to injury.
Exactly. And those muscle strains can be quite painful, limiting a player's ability to skate effectively and potentially impacting their performance on the ice.
This is where physical therapists come in with their arsenal of treatments and rehab strategies, right?
Absolutely. For both FAI and adductor strains, the focus is on restoring proper hip mechanics, reducing pain and inflammation, and strengthening the surrounding muscles.
And I imagine core strength plays a big role in hip stability and injury prevention.
You're absolutely right. A strong core helps to stabilize the pelvis and control hip movement, which reduces the strain on those vulnerable muscles and joints.
So it's all connected. The core, the hips, the knees, the ankles. A weakness in one link can impact the entire chain.
That's a fantastic way to put it. It highlights the importance of a holistic approach to treating and preventing hockey injuries. We need to look at the entire kinetic chain, not just the isolated problem area.
And preseason screenings, like those we discussed earlier, can be really valuable in identifying potential hip issues before they become full-blown injuries.
Absolutely. By assessing hip mobility, strength, and flexibility, we can pinpoint those athletes who might be at higher risk for hip injuries and implement targeted training programs to address those weaknesses.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here from head to toe, literally.
We have.
What are some key takeaways for our listener who's clearly passionate about physical therapy and sports injuries?
First and foremost, ice hockey injuries require a specialized understanding of the sport.
Okay.
It's not just about knowing anatomy and rehab protocols. It's about understanding the biomechanics of skating, the demands of different positions, and the impact of those high-velocity collisions.
It sounds like it's a niche area that requires a deep dive into the sport itself, not just the textbook knowledge.
Exactly. And secondly, early identification and appropriate management are crucial for optimal recovery and a safe return to play that means thorough assessments, accurate diagnoses, and individualized treatment plans.
And of course, we can't forget the importance of prevention.
Absolutely. Physical therapists play a vital role in educating athletes, coaches, and parents about injury risks, conducting preseason screenings, and implementing targeted training programs to address weaknesses and mitigate those risks.
We're almost at the end of our deep dive, but there's one more injury category the study mentions that I'd love to explore: lower leg injuries.
Yes, those often overlooked but equally important structures below the knee.
And surprisingly, despite all that protective gear, lower leg injuries are still fairly common in hockey.
They are.
The study specifically highlights syndesmotic injuries or high ankle sprains as a major concern.
That's right. And as we discussed earlier, the design of the skate itself, with its rigid structure and slightly dorsiflex position, actually contributes to the risk of these high ankle sprains.
So it's a trade-off between skating performance and injury vulnerability.
Exactly. And those high ankle sprains, as you might recall, are notorious for their longer recovery time compared to typical ankle sprains due to the involvement of that tough syndesmotic ligament.
So what's the rehab game plan for a hockey player with a high ankle sprain?
The study recommends a 3-stage approach: initial immobilization to allow those ligaments to heal, followed by gradual mobilization exercises to restore range of motion, and finally a progression to advanced on-ice training to prepare the ankle for the rigors of hockey.
And I bet those sport-specific drills are essential for simulating game-like scenarios and ensuring that ankle is truly ready for the demands of the sport.
Absolutely. It's about building strength, stability, and confidence in that ankle so the player can return to the ice safely and effectively. And of course, throughout the rehab process, we need to address any underlying biomechanical issues that might have contributed to the injury in the first place.
So it's not just about fixing the ankle, but optimizing movement patterns and strengthening the entire kinetic chain to prevent future injuries.
Precisely. It's a holistic approach, as always, and as physical therapists, we have a vital role to play in guiding these athletes through the rehab journey and empowering them to return to the ice stronger and more resilient than ever before.
This deep dive has been so insightful. I feel like I'm gaining a whole new appreciation for the complexities of hockey injuries and the crucial role physical therapists play in keeping these athletes healthy and performing at their best.
I'm glad to hear that it's a fascinating field and one that offers so much opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of athletes.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, the importance of preseason screenings.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure.
What types of screenings are typically done and what are we looking for?
Preseason screenings are a fantastic way to identify potential risk factors for injury before the season even starts. We're essentially trying to get a baseline assessment of the athlete's strength, flexibility, balance, and overall movement patterns. This might involve assessing things like range of motion. We want to make sure athletes have adequate flexibility in their joints, especially those that are crucial for hockey, like the hips, shoulders, and ankles.
Okay.
Muscle strength and imbalances. We look for any muscle weaknesses or imbalances that could increase the risk of injury. For example, weak hip abductors, as we discussed earlier, can contribute to knee instability.
Right.
Core stability. A strong core is essential for overall stability and injury prevention in hockey. We'll assess core strength and endurance to identify any areas that need improvement.
Got it.
Balance and coordination hockey requires excellent balance and coordination, so we'll assess these abilities using various tests, including single-leg stance assessments and agility drills.
Makes sense.
Posture. Poor posture can contribute to a variety of musculoskeletal problems, so we'll assess the athlete's posture and identify any areas that need correction.
Right.
By identifying these potential risk factors early on, we can develop individualized training programs to address them and hopefully prevent injuries from occurring in the first place.
It's so much more comprehensive than I realized. I can see why preseason screenings are so valuable. It's like getting a detailed roadmap of the athlete's body and identifying any potential roadblocks that could lead to injury down the line.
Exactly. And it's an opportunity to work collaboratively with the athlete, their coaches, and their parents to create a personalized plan for success, both on and off the ice.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more and more excited about the possibilities of a career in sports physical therapy.
That's great to hear.
I can't wait to see what other insights we uncover in the final part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it too.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into hockey injuries. We've explored a lot of the unique demands of this sport. We broke down those common injuries from concussions to high ankle sprains.
Right.
And we even uncovered some of those surprising connections to other sports like speed skating.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has.
And I think throughout our discussion, we've really emphasized the importance of understanding the biomechanics, implementing preventative strategies, and really embracing that holistic approach to treatment and rehab.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question, one that I think ties into your passion for physical therapy and the future of hockey.
Okay.
With the growing popularity of youth hockey.
Right.
And, we talked about that concerning statistic about the higher incidence of concussions in younger players.
Yeah.
What innovative strategies can PTs develop to minimize the long-term consequences of these injuries?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think deserves serious attention. We need to move beyond just treating the immediate symptoms of a concussion and really focus on long-term brain health.
What kind of strategies are we talking about here?
Well, it's a challenge, but I think it's one we need to embrace. Some potential strategies could involve developing age-appropriate return-to-play protocols,
Okay.
educating young athletes and their parents about the subtle signs of concussion, and incorporating exercises that challenge balance coordination and visual tracking into rehab programs.
So it's not just about, resting until those symptoms go away.
Right.
But actively working to retrain the brain and the body
Exactly.
to function optimally after a concussion.
100%. And it goes beyond just concussions, too.
Right.
I think we need to be proactive in addressing all types of hockey injuries in young players, promoting proper training techniques, emphasizing the importance of warm-ups and cool-downs, and working closely with coaches to foster a culture of safety on the ice.
It sounds like creating that collaborative environment is key, where physical therapists, coaches, parents, and athletes all work together to minimize those risks and maximize the benefits of this incredible sport.
Absolutely. It takes a team effort to keep young athletes healthy and thriving.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me, and I hope it sparked even more curiosity in you as you continue exploring the world of physical therapy and sports medicine. Keep those young athletes in mind. They're relying on us to help them stay safe and reach their full potential.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for tuning in to the Science of Hockey. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, teammates, or anyone who loves hockey as much as you do. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let us know what you liked, what you'd like to hear next, or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us make the show even better. Until next time, keep your skates sharp, your mind open, and keep chasing the science behind the game.